Morning to all of you who are joining the webinar. Welcome. We'll wait for people to come in. Wish we could see you, but we see your numbers climbing as participants. Jessa, you can tell me when you think would be a good time to start. I just want to allow people to join us if they're just a few minutes late.
One or two more still coming in. Let's give them another minute.
Great.
I think we're good. I think
Great.
But we don't want to get to the 5-minute rule.
Excellent. So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to this session on teaching and learning. I'm Elizabeth Roach. I am currently, but not for long, the Dean of Teaching and Learning. That I'm passing on to Gretchen Hurtt, who is currently the Dean of Studies and will be assuming the role of Dean of Teaching and Learning. I guess sort of like right after this panel, as Emily pointed out, that this is my last official duty. So we're really excited about talking about teaching and learning at St. Andrews. Also on this call is Emily Pressman, who is our Dean of Professional Development and Chair of the History Department. Stephen Mufuka, who is a teacher in the Religious Studies Department, and Will Rehrig, his reunion class may be joining on this call today, who works in the Science Department. And they'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the work that they do. And I just thought I would start with a brief overview of some of the things that we've been working on and thinking about in the area of teaching and learning over the past several years. Many of you perhaps have been part of this process. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions as we move through this hour with you. But there's nothing that we love to do more than talk about teaching and learning and what we do in the classroom space, because everything that happens, I think, in the classroom is so foundational to what we do in the rest of the school. So all of the skills and the habits of mind and everything that we enact in the classroom, we also enact in the school more broadly. And that's why it's so exciting to be in a St. Andrews classroom. We are really transforming students as intellectuals, as collaborators, and really inspiring confidence in all of them as lifelong learners. We're always seeking excellence, as you know, if you've been a student here at all recently. We've always been striving for excellence, and we're always looking for how we can push that excellence to the next level. And several years ago, we moved away from rote learning and memorization and that kind of teaching to a teaching for understanding, doing the authentic work of scholars in disciplines. And of course, that work is incredibly inspiring for our students because they are engaging deeply in the learning process with their teachers and their peers. They're learning how to collaborate. They're learning how to listen, to be open, to be flexible, to adjust their thinking. And they're they're learning how to engage deeply and rigorously. So that is the kind of process that we're all teaching in all disciplines, the authentic work of the scholars of that discipline and the professionals of that discipline. And we're learning how and teaching students how to work with each other in collaborative and rather than competitive ways. And I think that's really unique to the St. Andrews experience in the classroom. And students say this all the time, that in other schools, in their previous schools, and their friends who go to different schools, there's a kind of competitive quality to the classroom experience, competitive with their peers. We break that down completely and really ask the students to engage in a process of learning where we're all trying to push each other to be sharper thinkers and better scholars. And when you do that, it takes away a kind of pressure and anxiety, and it makes the learning experience something that is joyful and fun, as well as rigorous. And that's so important, to match rigor with joy in learning, because you can only really experience that authentic love of learning when you've actually been challenged and you've engaged rigorously. Then you feel incredibly fulfilled and satisfied, and a great deal of pride in the work that you're doing. So all of our assessments, our classroom lesson plans are all about that kind of collaborative learning, authentic learning, rigorous learning, and joyful learning. Of course, we rely on the expertise of our faculty, who are gifted in their disciplines, and they're also gifted in the art of human relationships and teaching teenagers, understanding teenagers, and being able to inspire and tap into those parts of our students who are striving to be scholars. So that's the art. That's the art of teaching, is how to both give them the knowledge and the skills to be scholars in their disciplines, and also be able to understand them and know them well enough to know what to do to inspire them. And we try to do a kind of blended learning pedagogical approach, what we call sort of the sweet spot of pedagogy, of some direct instruction and some independent inquiry. So when you start to blend those and find that balance and know when you need to be a teacher where you're giving them and helping them understand information, and when you need to push them to do more independent inquiry. So we're always looking for that balance in blended learning. We do it through assessments. We do it through the way, again, we set up our lesson plans. And for us as teachers, this environment is the very, very best environment to be a teacher, because we're basically learning from each other all the time. I've described St. Andrews as a learning lab for teachers because we have access to some of the best teachers and the best scholars that I've ever met. And we can just walk out of one classroom and go into another classroom, visit a class, have a conversation with another teacher, and learn something every single day. So inspiring teachers to embrace a kind of growth mindset every day and throughout the year is something that is really important to the whole academic program. Because we have to sort of be lifelong learners as well. As this year taught us, we had to pivot to virtual learning. We were completely ready to do that, not in terms of the fact that we'd ever taught virtually, but because we were always adapting and we're always learning, and we learn from each other. So we did have people on the faculty, teachers on the faculty, who had done more remote learning, virtual teaching and learning. They taught us, and we all embraced, again, that growth mindset of, okay, we're going to learn new skills, and we can take what we have always done as teachers. We can translate it, we can adjust it, and we can provide incredible instruction no matter what methodology and no matter what platform we're using. So this year has been a learning experience for all of us. It's been dynamic, it's been challenging, and it's been inspirational for me to see how the faculty has done such phenomenal work this year between hybrid learning, all virtual learning, teaching intense, teaching in mass, and we completed an incredible year. So I'm going to turn this over to Gretchen, who's going to talk a little bit more about all of the incredible work she's done in the area of learning support.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think you touched on so many things that make teaching at St. Andrews exciting and rewarding. I've been teaching English for about 16 years now, I guess, and just continually feel inspired by my students and that energy in the classroom. And by my colleagues. I would echo the ongoing learning that you're talking about, Elizabeth. And then I think at the core of what we do is the connection to the St. Andrews mission and purpose, and that really grounds everything we do, all our interactions with students. So today I just wanted to share with you a little bit about how we're making sure all students at St. Andrews are supported academically. And I think what we've done has really evolved in the past 5 or 6 years in ways that actually help all students and make sure that every single student is engaged and challenged and supported. So as we've learned more about how people learn and how teenage brains develop, we're just continually stretching the way we're meeting individual students' learning needs. Many students may need support with specific things like time management, organization, or they have a particular learning profile that we need to respond to. So we have a web of adults partnering with teachers and helping make sure that every kid's needs are met. One of those ways, of course, is the advising program that has always been in place at St. Andrews. We also have a squad of academic advisors who oversee, the academic progress and engagement of every student in a particular form. Of course, teachers are working individually with kids. We're meeting one-on-one all the time. That's sort of built into what we do. And then we also have a full-time learning specialist. Maggie Harris is currently in that role, and she works individually with students who might need particular support. And the great thing is Maggie, she helps partner with teachers, and she also helps give tips and tricks and workshops for every student at the school. And so while some students might need one-on-one meetings with Maggie for a period of time, especially while they're younger, we're aiming to give everybody that independence and those solid skills that will carry through their St. Andrews career, certainly into college and beyond. And we've realized that the strategies that work for students with specific learning challenges will also work for everyone and help everyone. So that's just a quick overview, and welcome everyone. I'm just so happy to be able to talk with you all. I wish we were somewhere on the St. Andrews campus, but I hope you can feel connected to the academic program of today. And we're psyched to hear your questions too.
I think, Will, do you want to?
Yeah,
go next?
Yeah, that's great. So first off, I have to give a shout out to the class of 2011. I hope some of you have woken up early enough to join us on this, and will join us on the nighttime later when we get to chat as a class. But I can't wait to see you all. And so it's so exciting to get to sit here on this panel and to get to talk to some of my classmates and alum. But maybe so I'm Will Rehrig. I graduated in 2011, as you might have just guessed, and I teach a couple of different science courses. I've taught physics while I'm here, and I currently teach chemistry, environmental science, and a new course in engineering, which I can talk a little bit about later. But maybe one of the biggest changes that have physically occurred on campus since you last visited was sort of the reimagining of Amos Hall. And if you can put yourself back to perhaps when you were in Amos Hall, you would not recognize the building of today. And that's for a lot of really good reasons. That building served us so well for so long, but it was time for it to really be reimagined to keep up with sort of the 21st century science and math that we were teaching at St. Andrews. And so the goal here was really to open up the building. So like I said, you may remember many of the small and dark nooks and crannies in that building that now you simply just wouldn't recognize these spaces. And these spaces are really designed to just allow for the true exploration of science and to allow students to really do the inquiry-based work of scientists. So all of our classrooms now are labs and classrooms. And just as Elizabeth was sort of talking about this blended approach to learning, it's the same in science. We can start with a quick, lecture about a topic and then immediately transition into the lab, have the students complete a lab collaboratively, come back, work in groups to analyze that, and then finish it with sort of a class sharing results. And before we were transferring spaces, the spaces were not as well equipped, and now we're able to do that all in one classroom, all in one environment. Which has also allowed us to introduce a lot of new elective-based courses. So now we have courses in anatomy and physiology, probably one of the most popular courses now on campus, taught by the incredible Dr. O'Connor. Or we've got courses in bioengineering taught by Harvey Johnson, or astronomy, or engineering, which is my course, all taught by faculty that are really passionate and experts in these sort of niche topics that our students are going on to explore, whether that's to become doctors, or to become engineers, or to become physicists or astrophysicists. They're really able to explore these in new levels that just wasn't possible before because we didn't have the space or the equipment available. In addition to that, it was really sort of the clairvoyant, I would say, of sort of with the pandemic and this transition. These spaces have allowed us, both when we're virtual, the integration of technology. Many of our faculty were still going into the classroom every day because they could connect with the technology available and see all of their students up on the whiteboard. They could then immediately switch over and switch to a different camera and do items in the lab as a demo, and then switch back. So students still felt like they were coming to class, coming to the actual Amos classrooms every day. And then when we were in person, it allowed us, all of our classrooms are now modular. So they have the space to allow us to spread out to accommodate social distancing when we needed to, but then again, to quickly switch up. So hopefully next year, when we're back to sort of being able to do things like we want to, we can quickly clear out a classroom, use it as a lab in physics. You can quickly see some carts on ramps and things like that, and then immediately make it a classroom again with the modular furniture. And then the last piece I would sort of add, and my favorite part about the building is just the way that it brings sort of the natural environment that we all love, the 2,200 acres, into the classroom with these just gorgeous bright windows that overlook Washburn Cove, and really just bring that in, but even more excitingly, bring students outside, whether that's going to the Peter McLean outdoor lecture classroom, or just taking them off sort of outside of the space, but we're really being able to integrate science with the natural environment that we want students to then be pushing. It's not limited to the four walls of the classroom, but really being able to see science in the world around them, and all they have to do is look out the window. And again, these gorgeous windows that are just bringing the trees and the life right into the classroom. So it's been incredibly exciting to get to work in this space. And I would just give a huge thank you to those alum that might be on this call and joining us that helped to make that possible, because it really has, again, allowed us to bring the 21st sort of STEM education that we were doing, that our teachers were already doing so well, to have a space that really appropriately accommodates that.
Thank you so much, Will. So beautifully said. And as you were just saying, space can really matter. We saw that when we built the new arts building. It was completed in the fall of 2004, and we'd always had great arts here, and then it was just this explosion of the arts and just a flourishing in just incredible ways. Everybody just wanted to be in that building. The same thing has happened with Amos. It is beautiful. So we can't wait for for you to come back and see that building and to inhabit it and explore it. And you'll see that it just makes the teaching and learning just come alive in such vibrant and exciting ways. Yeah, we can't wait to have all the students back in that building, as you said, Will, next fall. Stephen.
Well, hi, everybody. My name's Steve Mufuka. I've been teaching here for 4 years now. I teach in the religion department, and one of the courses that I teach is, I'm one of the teachers for the history of religious thought, which is a required course for all sophomores. And then I also teach an upper class course on mythology as well. So in keeping with this theme about the evolution of teaching and learning here at St. Andrews, I think it's probably best to start with the curriculum. So what has changed and why has it changed? And depending on where everybody is in terms of when they were here, is, originally when we had this required history of religious thought class, what it was a class on the Christian religion that everybody was required to take. And it was really from a Episcopal perspective. And over time, that has changed because the student body has changed as well. Probably really up to 6 years ago, there was another modification where we started teaching about the Abrahamic religion. So the big three, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And we're teaching that course all the way up to, I think, about 5 years ago. Now what we're teaching is we're teaching about the 5 major religions. So we're including Hinduism and we're including Buddhism. And the reason why we do that is because when we look at our student body and we see people coming from all over the world, whether it's India, whether it's Asia, whether it's Singapore, and the school is about this idea of faith and learning and understanding that faith is an important part of who a person is. It's an important part of their philosophy. It's an important part of the way they live their lives, that we have to be teaching about the values and beliefs that the students are going to find when they enter into the global world. That's a world that they're going to work in when they graduate from college. And so we want to make sure that they're ready for that. They have those empathetic skills where they're able to interact with their colleagues as well. I guess the second aspect would be on the teacher portfolios. Collecting student works and how do teachers kind of monitor their own profession. I think there's that great expression: if you can't measure it, then how can you manage it? And I think this is where technology has really kind of helped tremendously. And when you just think about learning, there's really the 4 things that happen in that process. There's a gathering of information, there's a storing of information, a processing of information, and then a retrieval of information. And for gathering that information, one of the ways that we do it now, especially when this pandemic is digital media. We're using webinars like we have here because we can't meet always in person. We use Zoom, right? We also have a learning management system that records all students' journal entries in there. So we're using that to gather information. And then storing that information, as you know, it's happening in the cloud. And that's a great thing because, anybody 20 years ago when they had to write a paper and they wrote 10 pages, and they didn't save it and they lost it, they could never get it back. And so storing it and having some place that's going to be there for all time is a tremendous benefit for the students because they're going to be coming back that later on or even later in the year and reflecting on certain ideas that they said and seeing where that growth occurred. Then with this idea of processing information, it's amazing what software can do. And I'm not a coding expert. I don't know how it works, but, in many ways, the software knows more about you than you do. Anybody who's been up at night at 10 o'clock on YouTube and you go there to click one video, you end up spending a half hour there because they know all your interests and they keep your attention there. And so that processing of information helps us as well because we're able to do much quicker than before is we're able to see certain trends that are happening in a student's performance. And then we're able to respond to those trends or have RTI, response to intervention, earlier and quicker so that a student doesn't get too far behind. And so there's not that gap in his learning and we can intervene quickly and effectively. And then the last part would be the retrieval of this information. Just with technology, with search engines, if I want something, I can get it quick. We have shared drives that are shared with all the teachers. If I want something from another teacher, I can get it quickly. All right, and that's a tremendous benefit because all those best practices are easily accessible and anybody has access to it. And the last, I guess, what I'll talk about is the pedagogy. And, in that way, and how we teach, I love the kind of expression, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I mean by that is at its core, the way we teach is the Harkness model. It is, and I don't like to use Harkness, I like the idea of the round table. And for me, that kind of represents this idea of equality. Everybody has an equal voice. That what we do here is we collaborate, we problem solve together, we learn together as well. And that's not going to change, and that hasn't changed. And yes, we do blended learning, but we're blending other things in around that ideas and those principles as well. And I guess the last thing I would say is we also understand that technology is a double-edged sword. There's a lot of errors that we sometimes make because we rely too much on it. And I'll just give you an example is, when I came in my first year, I was fresh with all these new ideas of like, these are all the great things we're going to bring to St. Andrews. And one of the idea I had was, well, why can't we have students like have all their assignments digitally? And then that way they can take digital notes as they read through their work. And then when they come to class, they have it all there. Well, that didn't quite work because one of the things we realized is they were getting distracted by YouTube or other things that they could get on the internet when they had their computers there. So, there's always that importance of finding that balance and knowing what works and what doesn't work, and then moving forward. So I guess I'll just end it there.
Thank you, Stephen. You said so many important things, and I think that's interesting to think about the more things change, the more things stay the same, because I think what we're trying to do all the time, as I was saying, is striving to make our teaching better and to find that right balance in the blended teaching and learning, and to steer away from ideologies that promise to be the next best way to teach something. Because all of those ideologies, in my 40-year experience, are usually short fads. So we have to think really carefully about those new ideologies that promise to be the key to teaching. We always have to remember that human element and exactly what our students need. Gretchen is always saying it's all about the students. That's what we're doing. It's not about us as teachers. It's about the student learning experience. So we're always thinking that way. And I think the new history of religious thought is a fantastic course. And students say that over and over again that it's fundamental to their understanding of themselves and the world. And to many belief systems, and it really opens them up to so much. It's a fantastic course. The redesign has been phenomenal. So thank you so much, Stephen. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Pressman. I am right now the outgoing chair of the history department, a position I have loved holding for many years now. This is actually I think was my 17th year at St. Andrews. So I know a couple of different reunion classes that are on the call right now. And as Elizabeth said, I also serve as Dean of Faculty Development. So thinking about sort of what are the ways that we as a faculty as a whole can be collaborating to become better, can be taking advantage of opportunities off campus, can be creating opportunities for one another on campus to be continuing to grow and develop. Because as Elizabeth was saying, we're very committed to the idea of modeling and embracing that same growth mindset that we want to be cultivating in our students. So, as a history teacher, so much of what I think I'm probably about to say will link into everything that has been said so far. A big part of what brought me to St. Andrews, aside from sort of the culture of the school being so distinctive, was that the culture of the history department from before I arrived was really this idea of doing the authentic work of historians. It wasn't about the memorization of names and dates. It was really about asking critical questions and about engaging with the primary source material and giving students the opportunity to really think and to be doing that analytical work, and that their ideas and their understanding and their questions are what matter, rather than someone else's interpretation to be simply consumed. And actually, that part of what we do both around the seminar table, as Stephen was saying, and then in that idea of sort of a larger conversation beyond our own classrooms that we're entering, is to help students see the scholarly world as a world of conversation, where their voices matter, where their voices have the opportunity to contribute something important through research, through analysis, through the variety of perspectives that they bring to the seminar table. So we really teach those fundamental skills to ninth graders in our US history class. That's sort of the foundational course for the history department. And then we've actually deliberately moved to have our upper level classes, this was in the last few years, our upper level classes, with the exception of the interdisciplinary humanities course in history, are now semester-long classes. And the idea of that was really to encourage students to take more different courses, to explore histories that they may not have any experience with before. And a big part of that is, as Stephen was saying, and in different kinds of ways, as Will was saying, a kind of preparation for engagement of the world. I mean, I think we're really fundamentally thinking about our teaching, and I think this is true in all of the disciplines, in two ways, both about sort of the disciplinary work and what would students do if they were to go on in college and even all the way into graduate school in our disciplines, and recognizing that a small number of them will go on into graduate school in our disciplines. How are we also preparing them to be citizens, whether that's American citizens or citizens of the countries from which they're coming, citizens of the world in that cosmopolitan sense, so that they're using these ways of thinking that we're giving them as ways of understanding themselves, their place in the world, and how they might contribute in meaningful ways, as well as these important scholarly disciplinary skills, and sort of seeing the bridge between those, that those scholarly disciplinary skills have real purpose in the world. So you know, that's I think felt really very true and powerful in the courses that I teach, maybe particularly in the last couple of years. You know, I teach a course on the history of social reform movements, and then in its third year this year was a relatively new course looking at American racism in the sort of the postbellum period through what's sometimes referred to as the nadir of race relations in the early 20th century in the US, and putting that in comparison and conversation with the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe in the early 20th century, sort of leading to the rise of the Nazis and the Holocaust. And it's been a really striking, both of those courses have been really striking for the ways that students, even as, you know, I'm someone, as a historian, I'm actively trained not to be presentist in my thinking. And I'm really adamant about that with my students. But at the same time, again, it's an opportunity to say, as we do this rigorous historical work, how can we historicize and understand some of what we're experiencing and seeing in the world right now? And I think that's a really powerful thing in all of the work that we're having students do. It's real work that matters in the world, and where they're seeing the resonance of that, whether it's, you know, in Ya Jesse's novel Homegoing, or whether it's in the work that they're doing, you know, in Will's environmental science class that's really helping them understand the climate crisis, or whether it's work that, you know, understanding the Wilmington massacre of 1898 and how that resonates in the attack on the Capitol of January 6th. So I think those are all really exciting things to be doing with our students, and to be opening them up to, and for us then as teachers, you know, I think, as a number of folks have said, we're learning from the students all the time, to be sort of seeing through their lens, what are the things that they really want to wrestle with and understand. So we are eager to have questions from you. We're going to encourage you to put them in the Q&A section rather than the chat section, because that's easier for us to sort of manage. We can check them off as we get to them. So So please, we want to use as much of the remainder of our time as possible to hear what you're interested in and want to know more about.
And as you're thinking about questions to put in the Q&A, I have to say that one of the great privileges of my professional as well as personal life is teaching a class with Emily Pressman since because some of you are in the class of 2011, along with Will Rehrig, was in our inaugural class of humanities. So this is a very big moment to think about that. Those of you who took the leap of faith and signed up for our course that year, and it was, for me professionally, just the most gratifying experience of my life, teaching next to one of the best teachers I've ever known, and learning so much from Emily every single day. And then to put our disciplines in conversation with one another, English and history, and to teach all of you in humanities over I guess it's 11 years. I don't want to know the number. It just seems like we had one great class after another. But so much fun. And we've been thinking about, because that model, it's a tough model to sustain in terms of two teachers in a classroom from two different disciplines, but we're finding ways to do that kind of interdisciplinary teaching, not only one teacher bringing two disciplines together like biochemistry. This year we had Terrence Gilhaney and Ashley Hyde teach a class. And now I'm going to forget the name of what was the name of the class? What was it?
Yep.
Nuclear
ethics.
Nuclear ethics. Yes. So those were two different teachers from two different disciplines teaching a class together. Really sort of, it raises a level of sophistication, of complexity for the students to bring disciplines together. It also really energizes teachers. So when we can, we're searching for ways and innovating ways to do that. And part of the schedule change that you've sort of heard about in terms of semester courses has allowed us to have that kind of innovation. And that's been a huge change in the last few years. We also changed the actual daily schedule. Gretchen led that charge a few years ago, a deep dive study into the best way for our students to learn and the best way for us to teach. So we've moved to longer classes that meet fewer times a week. And so there are fewer blocks during the day. Some of you may remember what it was like to have 7 or 8 different classes in a day for 40 minutes, which is just a scrambling kind of day, and didn't allow for any kind of deep discussion. The class was over just as you were getting started. It didn't allow for time for reflection and a readjustment of our brains between classes. And so before the pandemic, we had settled into 75-minute classes, four classes a day. It opened up, it slowed down the pace of the day. It intensified in all the best ways, the class periods themselves. It allowed for multiple things to happen in a class period, as Will was describing, sort of a mini lecture, a lab period, a reconvening, all that can happen in 75 minutes. It allowed for really deep and sustained discussions in classes. And for everybody, as Stephen was indicating, everyone's equal at the table. So it allowed for all the voices to have that opportunity to join the conversations. I think that's been an incredible change in the way that we've been able to teach the last several years. And I'm trying to think of we're not getting any questions, so we'll just keep talking.
I was going to reassure alums that we kept the components of our St. Andrew's Day and week that were so precious to everyone in the community. So there is still, sit down lunch and these rituals like school meeting built into that calendar, but there's no longer A week and B week. I'm really not sad about that because I remember as a class of 90 student sometimes showing up for the wrong week. And maybe some of you all had that experience too.
So Sally has a great question here. I'm going to read it, and we can all share in sort of the reflection of this. Thank you for sharing these inspiring thoughts. I'm a parent of children in a public elementary system with a great reputation, but I've actually been really discouraged by the amount of direct instruction and rote learning we have seen so far. Can you say a little bit more about discovery, joy, authentic engagement, and developing confidence in the classroom or discipline? That's the question. That is what we're striving for. So does anybody want to take that question and give some more examples or anecdotes, or sort of just how we do that? How do we create a joyful learning experience?
I'm happy to jump in and talk a little bit about that first, and maybe sort of with two bookend courses and thinking about that. But I think that's a huge challenge for science, right? And many of us not that long ago probably remember sort of science courses being all about memorization and sort of memorize this formula, memorize this element, and then just tell it back to me. But we all have quickly sort of realized in those processes that wasn't actually helping us do the work of scientists when we later had to do sort of the analyzing and the experimenting required, whether we were going to be scientists or any sort of future career. And so one example of this is in biology, where a few years ago they started the Biology Curiosity Project, or the Quest Project, as it's called. And this allows students sort of halfway through the year to pick a topic they're curious about within the 2,200 acres and to begin to just ask a question, and then to follow that question. And then that usually leads to another question. And then so they follow that question. And it's just this series of questions that students are creating on their own with the guidance of our teachers in self-discovery. And so it's something that they're passionate about. It's something they're interested in. And then they have to go do the hard work of doing the experiment, analyzing the results. Was that meaningful? So there were students that were recording mockingbird signals or calls and trying to understand what their actions were, and then watching, okay, what did they do after they made that call, and what does that look like? Or we had students out measuring trees and growth and where the different trees are. And then that continues, again, sort of in bookend in AS environmental science. I have students finish with an independent project where, again, they pick something that they are curious about and that they want to answer. And I expect a much higher level, right? They did that first now as third formers, and now they're sixth formers. And what have you learned across sort of your science discipline that now you're going to go? I had students growing algae and biology to look at eutrophication and sort of what that looks like in the pond, or students out measuring frog populations and trying to get an estimate of where the frogs on St. Andrews are. And so I think it's really integrating our content knowledge into allowing students opportunities for self-discovery. And that's happening in all of the courses, but it really leads to them getting to apply what we're teaching them in something that they are interested and passionate about.
The other model we use is just the exhibition model, which started, I mean, artists have always exhibited, but we started using exhibitions in the English department, and there are other departments now who are using that kind of assessment, which is basically breaking down the class to a smaller number of students in English. They read each other's papers, and then they engage in a conversation about how can we, in collaboration with one another, help each other refine our arguments, maybe complicate them, and develop them, and clarify and help each other to do that work. So with the mindset of learning, there's always another version of your paper. Learning is ongoing, and learning, we can help each other as learners. And when you do that, the students get so excited. There's, as I said before, there's not the pressure to write the perfect paper, because there's no such thing. There's always another version of that paper. And when you get them to inhabit and embrace the notion that learning is ongoing, as Will just described in the science classes, then they're eager to keep pushing themselves rather than thinking they're trying to get a particular test grade or memorize facts. So it's real, it's authentic. I mean, what the history department does is absolutely phenomenal with primary documents and primary sources. It allows the students to be historians. So I think that's really the key to that kind of joy that we're seeking in the learning process, is to strip away some of the pressures. That doesn't mean that it's not rigorous. And I always have to like remind people of that the rigor, the joy actually comes from the rigor of it, but it's real learning, it's authentic learning, and it's collaborative learning. And those different forms of assessment, you know, from exhibition to the curiosity quest to the independent projects to the research papers, all of those are the kinds of things that we're seeking to keep developing and refining as we move through our curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually much harder to really think than it is to memorize, right? And so one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is sort of how do we, and I think this gets to part of what you're interested in, Sally, how do we help students who have a variety of different backgrounds and training come into that kind of an authentic approach that Elizabeth was describing, and feel sort of safe and supported and scaffolded in taking those risks, because it again, I would argue it's much more rigorous. It's much, and for some kids can be initially a little bit sort of scarier to go into something where you're not being told how to think. You actually need to do the thinking. We're giving you the materials. We're going to talk about the skills. We're going to talk about opportunities to test those out. But it's ultimately about you and what you can do in thinking and analyzing and bringing together these ideas. So we're really committed to, you know, I think for so many of us, whether as students or faculty or both, what brought us to St. Andrews was the school's commitment to financial aid, to a diverse student body, and to having this be a community that would be open to all, you know, sort of regardless of background. And I think that means including people who have really different kinds of educational backgrounds. So we're thinking a lot about how do we, what's the ninth grade experience like for all of our new students too, not just the ninth graders, but with particular attention, since most of our students come new as ninth graders. You know, for a student who's coming from a school experience where all they've had is rote learning, how do we give them the structures and scaffolds and opportunities to make sure that they can feel like they're comfortable taking those kinds of risks? How do we make sure that all of our students see themselves fully represented in the curriculum? How do we make sure that whether it's in the histories that are studied, in the novels that are taught, in the kinds of questions in science and math, you know, what in a word problem, how important is it to have representation in a word problem in a math class of what different kinds of families look like? Or how can statistics be used to analyze the ways that redlining has affected the, you know, opportunities for wealth building for Black Americans, right? Like we're making sure and working really hard to make sure that because this is what it means to be a teacher, right? This is the calling, to make sure that all of our students are seeing themselves represented in the curriculum in various kinds of ways that validate and remind everyone you're meant to be here, right? And we're going to support you in everything that it takes to have you be able to have a really successful experience.
I wanted to build on this, Emily, and just share that we've been studying these questions at St. Andrews. How are we doing with this? How are we serving students from all different backgrounds who come in and join our academic program? So we've been actually, many of us on this call have been part of a study, a self-study, where we poll the students frequently to get their reflections on their ninth grade experience. And we're looking at specific things we can do, like mapping out our curriculum, bringing teachers, especially younger students, into alignment on those core assessments and the teaching of the skills that they need, making it really transparent. What are the things one does around the seminar table, and actually teaching those skills explicitly. So we are really thinking hard about how does the school, what are the systems, right? What are the processes and the tweaks we can make to make sure that we're actually doing concrete things, offering multiple kinds of assessments, scaffolding, making things explicit, and offering the support, like I talked about earlier, right? Matching up students with mentors and with a little extra help when they need it.
And I think we've answered Treva's great question with both of Emily and Gretchen's reflections, and Treva's question is fundamental and so important to everything we do. Treva, thank you for asking the question. What are the ways in which St. Andrews infuses the faculty with sensitivity to the potential experience of invisibility by underrepresented students of color, specifically as it relates to assessments or content choices?
Yeah, and this is a place where I'd give a shout out to fellow alum Devin Dupre, who has just done some really incredible work, I think, of making us particularly aware of our blind spots as faculty, and then how we're bringing that into the classroom, and being really aware again of the experience that might be very different for every single student in our classroom, and how we're sort of approaching them to make sure everybody feels very welcome at the table, as sort of Stephen was saying.
Yeah, and one of the things I would add to that, I think that for me, I think the number one thing that a faculty can do is just be present. The difference about St. Andrews, because it's a boarding school, the faculty are around the students all the time. They're there on the soccer field. They're rooting for them, when they're playing matches. They're going by their dorm, going by their room right before they go to sleep as well. And there's a great quote, I think it's supposedly Theodore Roosevelt said it, that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And with many people that feel invisible, they need to build that sense of trust first before they'll talk to you. And when they do have that conversation, then they're making us aware of this is what their needs are. And when we know their needs, that's when we can actually implement a plan that meets those needs as well. So I think that's the number one thing. And I think one of the things we do very, very well at St. Andrews is in that hiring process, we're weeding out those faculty members who don't really want to be here or don't want to be around students. And we're making sure that we have the right teachers that are empathetic and want to be here for the right reasons.
Yeah, you got to love teenagers to do this work. And, teenagers are incredibly complex and incredibly interesting and really so wonderful and curious and dynamic and searching for their own voices and for connection to adults. So it's really pretty incredible to be on this campus with students who are eager to learn and who are eager to be in connection with adults. And that's where I think I began with the notion of classrooms. Really, everything that happens in the classroom sort of radiates out to the culture at the school more broadly, and it's part of that. It's part of that seeing everybody, being open to everybody, being empathetic with those around us, and taking those skills of listening and openness and collaboration that we learn in an intellectual setting, in an academic setting, and translating those to how we live with each other in dormitories, how we interact with each other in the dining hall, at the tables for sit-down lunches, how we work on athletic teams, how we work together in the arts. All of it it starts in the classroom, and it just resonates in so many profound ways in the way that we live and work together in this community. So I think we're just about out of time, and I know there's another event. The Chessa it's a tour of the campus, right, Chessa?
Elizabeth, that was a wonderful segue to the tour. So thank you all. And as always, if you all have more questions for these faculty members or burning questions about any aspect of the academics, I'm sure Elizabeth or now Gretchen would welcome those by email if you wake up in the middle of tonight and say, oh, I should have asked about that. But thank you all. And we'll move on to some of you, I think, are going to continue on to the tour. You've got to sign out and sign back in as we're all learning to be pivoting in the technology. And I want to say thank you to all our faculty. Have a wonderful summer. And I'll look forward to seeing you on campus, and Elizabeth coming back on campus too next year.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
Being here, everyone.
Thank you all.